Good morning and a very happy Easter to everyone in the parish of Stannington and beyond. To celebrate Easter, I've ventured out of the vicarage into the vicarage garden in memory of that first Easter morning when Mary went to the garden to visit the tomb. I don't have a whole tomb in my garden, but I do have an Easter egg. A reminder of the new life that sprung from the tomb on that first Easter morning, and of the stone that was rolled away from the entrance. The Gospel reading is taken today from Matthew, chapter 28, verses 1 to 10. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat upon it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has been raised from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message for you." So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." They came to him and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." May my words and our thoughts be now and always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. After the Sabbath, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to the tomb. It's early in the morning on the first day of the week, and the scene is a garden. As I've been speaking to people around the parish over the last few weeks, gardens have featured large in our conversations. Those lucky enough to have gardens have found them to be sanctuaries, places where they can spend hours and days working or resting or simply feeling the freedom of being outside. Our garden has changed a lot over the years. When the children were very small, it was full of plastic trikes and Wendy house and baby swings. And as they've got older, they've been replaced by trampoline, football, tennis rackets. Because gardens are not only places where flowers grow, they are also places where people grow, relishing the freedom of the outside and the fresh air and the sun. But Mary have not gone to the garden this Easter morning to celebrate life. They've gone to mourn death. They're here to visit the body of Jesus, their Saviour, who died and was buried 3 days ago. We have a sense from the first verse of Matthew 28 of a quiet and peaceful scene. Mary arrive in the garden in the half-light of early morning. But what they find is not at all what they were expecting. Suddenly there is a great earthquake. An angel appears like lightning and descends from heaven, rolls back the stone and sits on it. An extraordinary combination of the miraculous and the ordinary. The guards are terrified. But the angel doesn't speak to the guards. He speaks to the women. "Do not be afraid. I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has been raised as he said. Come and see the place where he lay." And the women are described as having two feelings, great fear and great joy. Very powerful combination. I wonder whether you can remember a time when you felt great fear and great joy. Perhaps something wonderful's happened which is also going to be a lot of work. Perhaps something amazing which changes your plans entirely and you can't quite take in. Mary and Mary felt all of those things. They've come to witness an ending, but are witnessing a beginning. They've come to mourn a death and are experiencing life. It must have been overwhelming. And they do as the angel asks. They go and tell the disciples, a task which earns Mary Magdalene the title she's later given as apostle to the apostles, evangelist to the evangelists. She is the first to tell the good news of Jesus Christ risen from the dead. And so to return to the garden, the resurrection story tells us about life after death, and the flowers and the trees which surround us can help us to understand what that means. Easter always falls in springtime, when buds are starting to turn to flowers. The bulbs which have been buried silently in the ground all winter, preparing for the moment of spring, send their shoots through the earth. And after they've grown and flowered, they return to the earth to provide life for next year. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. It's in the act of dying that the fruit is revealed. On this Easter morning, as we remember the truth of the resurrection, Jesus rising from the dead, we also remember the importance of the whole story. Without the crucifixion, there would be no resurrection. Without the darkest night, there would be no breaking of the dawn. The story of Palm Sunday to Easter morning gives us the full spectrum, the full range of human experience and emotion. The joyful, triumphal entry into Jerusalem, the pain and despair of the cross, the triumph of Easter morning. And so it is with our lives. It feels as though we've come to the end of the most Lentish Lent we have ever had. We've given up more things than we ever thought were possible. We've taken on things that we would never have imagined. There's not one person who's been unaffected, but we have not all been affected in the same way or to the same extent. For some of us, Good Friday has meant illness and even death, against which mild inconvenience for many of us can't even begin to compare. And yet, in many ways, there's been a real sense of us travelling along the road together, with a commitment to keep each other safe, to act in ways that preserve life, so that we can move forward together. On that first Easter morning, there was a lot that Mary Magdalene and the other Mary did not know. They didn't know that this was the beginning of a church that was to last from that day to this, that their visit to the garden on Easter morning would go down in history as one of the most important events ever to happen, the most important event in the Christian calendar. They were becoming central characters in the New Testament without having any idea at all. All they could do was put one foot in front of the other in faith. Go and tell the disciples the good news as the angel had told them to do, and do the next thing which seemed right to them. And so it is with us. Over these next few weeks and months, there will continue to be a lot which is new and unfamiliar and uncomfortable. There will be moments when we don't know what to do for the best, when the way ahead is not clear, and we have to rely on instinct and prayer and hope for the best. But just like these women in the garden on the first Easter morning, we can take our hesitant steps into the future, knowing that Jesus is with us. The risen Lord is by our side, and even in the darkest of times, he gives us hope. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And so, as we spend time in our gardens outside over the next few weeks, as we watch the sun and the rain stir the soil and bring out the flowers and the buds and the blossom, may we remember the truth of the resurrection story and the light and life that Jesus gives us this Easter morning and forevermore. Amen.